Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first night of our virtual fishing event here. We're going to be talking some bass fishing. We're super excited about that. Got my co-host here, Matt. He's going to be jumping up on here and let him introduce himself and kind of tell him what he's going to be doing this evening.
Yeah, I'm just one of your Fargo SCHEELS experts at the Fargo store, obviously. But this night is definitely one of the nights that I really want to stay tuned on because I'm a bass fisherman. I was brought up to be a walleye fisherman, but obviously that didn't work out. So just love bass fishing. From North Dakota, I fish North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, just really those three states. But bass fishing is obviously a little bit different from my side of things to Pat and Josh's side of things. So they're going to have some really good input, and I'm just really excited for tonight. So I'm going to be answering all your guys' questions on the YouTube side of things, and then I'll probably come back on during the prize drawing. So
very cool. Yeah, we got a heavy night tonight with Pat Schlapper and Jason Douglas, a couple pro fishermen, and hopefully I got Pat's last name correct. If I did not, it's my fault. But again, I mean, these guys, we have the opportunity, and especially the audience out there, we have the opportunity right now to ask these guys questions. They're in the heat of the battle right now. I mean, we were just talking before. Mr. Jason is actually fishing tournament or pre-fishing tournament right now. Pat is doing the same thing. I mean, I love the deer head in the back. It's a little small for a North Dakota deer, so we know you're not no deck. But anyways, we're excited to get going. There's going to be a prize drawing at the end of the night. We have two winners this evening. And split up a prize package, so there's going to be some great gift cards given away, and went up to $1,000 as the top one. Oh, sorry, Josh, I called you Jason. I apologize. I'm getting excited for Jason Mitchell here coming up in a couple nights too. So it's a heavy night, heavy week, I should say. All right, so please make sure everyone that's tuning in for the first time, make sure you're going to scheels.com/fish series to get registered for the prize drawing, as well as see a layout for the rest of the week. And so with that, if we could, since Josh, I butchered your name already, I apologize. If you would, just kind of give us a little bit of background. What got you into fishing? What got you in the tournament, the competitive side? And obviously, you definitely live a unique lifestyle with traveling around with your wife and your dog. So it's everyone wants to hear. So,
yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me on. This is pretty awesome. Yeah, I'm born and raised in Minnesota. I've lived a few other places just to learn how to fish, like Florida and Tennessee, just to learn how to fish places like that. But basically, grew up in the Twin Cities. Lake Mille Lacs is my home now, where I guide up there. Been up there for 4 or 5 years. Tournament fishing for me, I'm a sports nut. I'm into all kinds of sports. I played hockey, I played golf, I played football, played hockey year round. So I had the competitive gene, and fishing is what I liked the most of all the sports, was just what I really enjoyed to do. And so the competitive nature was there. Once I started guiding, I just kept looking at local tournament stuff, and I just didn't think too quick about it. As soon as I had some success at the state level, I just went to the next level and just keep trying to go. As long as I'm out bass fishing, that's really the thing that makes me the happiest. So, but since I was a kid, tournament fishing was something that, watching old Bassmaster stuff, some of the older FLW stuff, and just, watching that and just wondering what it would be like if I could ever make something like that happen. So, but yeah, now we're traveling with the whole fam, me and my wife, Bree, and my dog, Lutzen. We got a camper. So, when it's cold in Minnesota after hunting season, we tend to be down in a little bit more warmer climate, chasing bass. So yeah, it's a fun ride for sure.
So do you like smallmouth or largemouth more?
I like them both, actually, the same. I don't like spotted bass. I want to like spotted bass, but they don't like me. But largemouth and smallmouth, they're pretty equal. I guess if I could only catch one, it'd probably be a smallmouth.
Better fight?
No, not necessarily even. I don't know. I get to wear my bibs a lot, and I like wearing bibs. And when I'm wearing my smallie fishing, I got my bibs on. So
yep. And they taste better too.
But yeah,
right?
And I like spinning rods. I like to have a spinning rod in my hand as much as I possibly can, and smallies like that flavor. So
very good. Well, thank you, Pat. How about you?
Yeah, well, for me, my story is a little different than Josh's. I actually started working at SCHEELS in 2004 in college, and worked there full time up until last year, when I decided to try to make it to the Elite Series by going through the Bassmaster Opens. Like Josh, it had always kind of been a dream of mine, and for me, it had to kind of take a back seat for a while because I got into that. A lot of people that start working at SCHEELS, they start there part-time and they're going to kind of move on. And next thing you know, it's 15 years down the road and it's a career. And that happened to me, which was great. Because honestly, that's what allowed me to go chase the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still working with me, allowing me to do it. So I made it last year, actually, through the Bassmaster Opens, and I also made it through the Bass Nation Championship. And by winning that, I also get to go to the Bassmaster Classic this year. So,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy year for me. I mean, just a big life-changing opportunity to go chase my dream, and now I get to do it because I made it happen last year. So it's been really awesome. I've always loved to fish and fish tournaments a long, long time, but now I get to do it at the highest level.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yep. All right, so we're just going to jump in. We got questions rolling in here. I think the first one I'm going to pick right now just because of the time of the year and where we're at right now, but will you explain pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn fishing tactics? And what are you guys looking for staging areas to kind of reduce that time spent searching?
You want to go or you want me to go, Josh?
We're doing the whole pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn?
Yep.
Don't matter. Go ahead.
Hey, Pat, why don't you take pre-spawn?
Yep. Okay, so pre-spawn, which is actually probably my favorite time of the year to fish. The biggest thing that I pay attention to, whether it's smallmouth or largemouth, is water temperature. So that time of the year, for me, I like to see it. I'm kind of talking up north. It's maybe a little different in the southern part of the country, but once it gets to that 50-degree mark, I start to feel like I can start to catch them better. And still at 50 degrees, that's still pretty cold. I'm mainly going to use a jerk bait a lot. So that's probably, sorry, my phone's kind of spazzing out here. That's probably my number one bait, whether it's largemouth or smallmouth. And I'll typically look for long points leading into an area where I know the fish are going to spawn. So whether it's, sorry, I don't know what's going on.
Technology.
Yes, and I'm not good with it. So especially with smallmouth, I like to have a long point, something that's deep on the end that tapers up to something shallow, because eventually those fish will end up on the shallow part of it. But usually they'll winter out, in the deeper water, and they'll gradually work their way up that point. And a jerk bait is my favorite way to cover that water. So that's kind of my take on it. Obviously, I could go into that a lot more, but those are the general things that I look for. Water temperature, I like it when it gets to 50 degrees. Points leading into pockets where the fish are going to spawn. Jerk bait.
Is there a certain depth you're looking for?
It all depends on the lake, the clarity, and the water temperature. For small, I keep going back to smallmouth because that's like my favorite thing to do with this pre-spawn smallmouth. I'd say, I like to catch them when they're in that 8 to 15 foot range. That's when I feel like in the pre-spawn, when they get to that depth, that's when I feel like I'm going to get the biggest fish. Obviously, you'll catch them out, deeper too. But when you get a good sunny day with the wind blowing, that water getting into that low 50 degrees, take that jerk bait, start covering water, and you catch some big fish.
That's great. Thank you. All right. So what about spawn and then post-spawn?
I'm doing spawn and the post spawn.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fair
Thanks,
enough.
Josh.
The spawn's actually kind of boring. You're going to want to try to find whether it's largemouth or smallmouth. Really, you want to try to find your temperature is a big deal too. Like what Pat was saying, pre-spawn, spawn. Until you get through the spawn, that water temp's going to be a really big deal. So especially when it comes to largemouth stuff like that, your early smallmouth stuff will all be in like your protected bays that are going to be protected from those cold north winds, whether you're in Texas or Minnesota, you're going to have cold north winds. It's all relative at some point. It might be a little bit stiffer and colder up north where we're from, but nonetheless, you're going to have them both. So you really want to find that protected water, the warmest protected water. And then, as it goes on, when we start dealing with both largemouth and smallmouth too, they'll start to venture out into more the main lake. So then your main lake fish will start to pull up. They'll be after those ones that were in the protected areas. It's a lot of sight fishing with your eyes if you can see them. If it's dirty water, or if they're spawning like I'm at a place like Douglas Lake right now, they're just spawning a little deeper. So you got to kind of, the water moves so much. So you're just kind of feeling around for the bites where the areas are. And that's the spawn. And then you're going to have your males are the ones that are on the beds, holding down the bed. The female kind of comes in, does her thing. That's going to be your chance to catch, that big female. At the same time, largemouth, I like when the female's on the bed. Smallies, I don't like when the female's there. I like to pick her off like a hair jig or a spy bait or a jerk bait, like what Pat was saying. Cruising around, it seems like they don't like to sit there and protect. They're just doing their thing and off she goes right away. So that's kind of the spawn. If I'm fishing for smallies on a place like Mille Lacs for the spawn, I'll just be whipping a hair jig around or a jerk bait or something like that. Maybe a popper. They'll show themselves on a popper, something like that, where they're at until I visually see one. Then I'm going to actually work to catch that fish. They don't eat when they're on the bed. They're not eating there to fill their stomachs. They're just trying to move stuff away. Mm-hmm. So basically that's going to be your spawn. And then the post spawn comes with a funkiness. Your fish are going to be a little bit more beat up from the spawn. And it isn't just fishermen. Fishermen are probably a very small percentage of the harassment that they take. It's more so, the bluegills are coming in there, the perch are in there, they just have all kinds of competition. The walleyes are done spawning, they're moving in. So the fish are, they're a little bit beat up. They're kind of moving around. You don't really know quite where they're at, but I tend to try to stay. It depends on your fishery. So some fisheries, they're going to stay shallow. It's where the forage goes. If the forage is still shallow and stays shallow, then those fish are going to be there. And you got a good couple weeks after the spawn to really take advantage of that. Otherwise, you got to go deep if that's where they're at. Places like Kentucky Lake and stuff. I took a third place in a tournament there where I was catching them in like 30 feet, and their tails were still bleeding, like dripping blood from just getting off a bed and then immediately going out to a main river ledge like that. So, you're either going to stay shallow, wacky worm, stuff like that, just trying to grab bites, maybe a little bit of top water. Otherwise, you got to get out deep where the forage is again, because that's where they're going to be to start feeding up. And then one more thing too, we don't deal with this a lot in Minnesota, but around the rest of the country, following the spawn, you'll usually have a shad spawn. That's a big deal, and that's a great way to catch big fish. They know where that shad spawn is going to go. So as soon as those females get done, which are your bigger fish,
mm-hmm.
They're going to move out and they're going to attack those easy shad that are up there doing their thing too.
Yep. Okay, very good. All right, so for Pat, we got a question for you. What is it like to be a rookie, even though you've been winning a ton of local tournaments for the last 20 years?
Well, yeah, being a rookie at this level is it's a little different. I mean, it's been the whole season's been interesting so far. The rookie aspect of it, I haven't really thought about, honestly, because everybody is just so good at this level. You look at the rest of the rookies we have this year in the elites, and it's a pretty stout lineup of people that know how to catch them. So it feels good to be fishing against all those guys. I'm not sure if I fit in there yet, but it's been fun.
That's great. All right, so Josh, this will be for you. How do you eliminate unproductive water when looking at a map?
Yeah, that's kind of it's hard to do. Time of year is going to be a big deal as far as eliminating that water. If you're around the pre-spawn and spawn, like Pat was saying, pre-spawn, you can generally start eliminating a lot of that deeper water. Those fish are going to start to move up. So that kind of gives you areas, like he was saying, you want spawning coves, and then you want points and ditches leading into those type of things. So then that kind of does away with a lot of it. I would say the biggest thing is going to be time of year and knowing your forage base, where the forage is, what it is that they're eating. If you know that, then you can kind of start eliminate. If you're on like a herring lake, then you can probably not, they're out deep over deep water. There's not going to be a lot of fish shallow. Vice versa, if you're somewhere that's got a bunch of bluegills and crawdads and stuff, you're probably going to have a pretty good concentration of fish shallow and less deep. So I think the biggest thing is just kind of when you're doing your map studies, just knowing your time of year, knowing how fish like to transition, their flight path in and back out. Their biggest thing is food. That's it. Food and the spawn. And the spawn's a short window really out of the full year. So it's going to be about food. So knowing what their forage base is will definitely help you, eliminate a lot of water.
Very good. All right. So how long do you guys wait before you're changing colors or baits at this time of year? So say preseason, right? Or pre-spawn, excuse me. I don't know how much spawning is really going on outside of the deep south, but in most of our store markets outside of Texas, I mean, we may even be pre-spawn at this point since we got 3 inches of snow on the ground right now.
Yeah.
But what are you guys looking at for that?
I mean, as far as changing baits and colors and stuff like that, I just have like with a jerk bait, I'll have 3 different colors out. Usually I'll have a deep jerk bait and a couple, regular diving jerk baits. And then, if we're talking largemouth, depending upon what's going on, I'll usually have a chatterbait, a swim jig, stuff to cover water with, maybe a rattle trap. I don't get too hung up on color stuff. Honestly, it's pretty simple for me. I mean, black, blue, green, pumpkin, white, something in those shades. And then it's just all depending on the conditions. If you look at like a swim jig versus chatterbait, which are 2 of the most classic pre-spawn baits, like to me, if there's wind blowing or the water's a little darker, I'm throwing a chatterbait 99% of the time. If the water's clear or maybe them fish just aren't quite as aggressive, then I'll throw a swim jig. But they're interchangeable. You got to have them both out. Same with a deep jerk bait and a shallow jerk bait. You got to have them both out. You can't have just one. So it's not about like every bait I'll have confidence in. It's not about switching to a different bait because the one I'm using isn't working. It's switching to a different bait because I need that different presentation or something changed to make this bait work better. So.
Very good. Josh?
Yeah, I'm pretty simple when it comes to colors. Not what no tackle companies want us to say, right? They want us to say a whole bunch of stuff. But no, green pumpkin, your black and blue, your white, stuff to match the shad. Mostly when I'm changing colors, same as Pat, I got different things for different presentations, depending on what it is that I'm looking at or that fish. The biggest things while I'll change colors is, whether it's bluebird skies, sunny out or cloudy, that I can notice sometimes a pretty big difference between baits, especially stuff like jerk baits and stuff like that, what they'll key in on and how they're looking at it. So basically I try to keep it as simple as I possibly can. And again, I'm going to go back to the forage. I'm going to try to just match what it is that they're eating a lot. But now again, when we're talking about smallmouth, on the other hand, smallmouth's a little bit different character because they'll eat them bright, kind of flamboyant colors, the pinks and stuff, just because they can see so good. They have great eyes, and they also have a terrible attitude. So anything that comes across, if you can just get there, if they're in the right mood, and you can get a bait in front of them. That's the one fish that I'll sometimes in the pre-spawn I'll play around with a little bit different colors, but otherwise I keep it pretty confident, whatever my confidence colors are and whatever's going to match that forage. And then just over time, you kind of pick up on some lakes are notorious for a certain color working really good. And then lastly, I have lately been changing colors a little bit because of the addition of the Lowrance active target. I can see a fish's attitude as if I was looking at it with my glasses, looking at it up on the bank and, throw something to it and it spooks away. I know, okay, I didn't like that. I need to switch it up. Now, that might be a whole bait change. And sometimes I've seen just a color change. They come in, they look at it, they don't quite want it, they leave. Or they sit there, they don't eat it. A quick color change, and all of a sudden they're on it. Generally, it's a bait change, but at the same time, I have seen where a color will play. But I used to get into it, and next thing you know, I just had way too much tackle in my boat. My head was spinning before I ever got out there because I didn't even know what color I wanted to use.
Yep. All right, so you kind of answered one of the questions a little bit. Excuse me, but favorite electronic to put on the front of your deck? What are you guys' go-to units?
Yeah, like the favorite for my boat?
Yeah, the front. Yep.
Yeah, well, it'd be Lowrance all the way around, but I'd have to have the active target now is a really, really big deal to be able to just see what's coming, what's in front of you, and how those fish are acting, bait, everything. It's that's a big deal. Forward-looking sonar is as big of a deal as side imaging was when it came out. So,
Pat?
Yeah, that's a question I get. I get asked that so much because, unlike Josh, I have 2 different brands of electronics on my boat. I've run Humminbird for years because of their side imaging and 360, but they do not have any they're going to have, a live view forward facing sonar, but they don't as of now. And I put that Garmin Live Scope on my boat, I think 3 years ago now. So, and I would say if you took that Live Scope away from me right now, that wouldn't be good. There'd be consequences. I still like the 360, but if you do not have a live scope on your boat, you're missing a lot of opportunity. That's just the bottom line. And I don't get paid by any of those companies at all. That's just the facts. That live scope probably, I guess if you take the nation championship out, that live scope probably single-handedly got me to the Elite Series. Wow.
That's a lot of confidence.
That's not confidence. It's a fact. Lake Hartwell, Lay Lake, not really on Kissimmee Cherokee Lake. All those lakes, that I placed high in, 90% of the fish I caught, 95% of the fish I caught on them lakes, I watched every one of them bite the bait. And it wasn't with my eyes.
That's incredible. All right, so now we're getting into some new angler questions here. I just saw it. So best starter rod and reel for a spinning rod. Rod and reel. Obviously, Josh, we see your shirt.
Yeah.
What Shimano's do you like? Would you recommend?
For a spinning reel?
Yep. And rod.
You said spinning, right?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. I'll give you a high end and I'll give you a mid range one to go with. The Shimano Vanford's the best bang for its buck out there for a spinning reel. Awesome spinning reel. It's a step up from what they used to have as a CI4, which was a super popular reel. Mm-hmm. And then on the high end, it's the Shimano Accents. That's the one that I tend to use the most. If you can, why wouldn't you? You got a lot more bearings in it and stuff like that. And again, I'm a spinning rod and reel junkie, so I treasure those things as much as anything else I got for sure. But and then a rod, G Loomis rods are what I use. G Loomis rods, Shimano reels. So that would definitely be what I would recommend.
Very good, Pat.
I'm gonna kind of go on the end of I got asked that a lot all the years of selling product at SCHEELS, and when someone came in and wanted a beginner setup, you would show them the expensive stuff, but one of my favorite rods for the money is going to be a St. Croix Triumph. It's a $100 rod. You get a 6.6 medium, medium power fast action, and then I would put maybe some sort of Shimano reel on it or a Daiwa 2500 size. Mm-hmm. That's what I would, you can get a really nice rod and reel for $150 to $200 now. Obviously, as you spend more money, you're getting higher quality, better sensitivity, and all that. But you pick up that Triumph. If you pick that up blindfolded and fished with it, you would you would think it was a lot more money than $100.
Very good. What about casting setup, guys? Either one of you is fine. I know that. Again, the spinning stuff, there's so much variance that goes into it, depending on the bait size, depending on the conditions. Rod length, action, extra fast, moderate, graphite composite, if it's glass or whatever it might be. There's just so many things that go into it. But, for the bass fishing side of it, the general, 80-20 rule, 80% of the time when you're fishing, what is your go-to casting setup?
I would do a 7-foot medium heavy fast action rod. So something like, like St. Croix Victory, that's like $180 rod, which it's a great line of rods for that price point. Put whatever bait casting reel you want on it. I don't know if I'd probably put braid on it, depending upon how, what type of fishing you're going to be doing. But I think generally I would probably put like a 30 or 40 pound braid on it. That's my preference, though. That might cause a lot of arguments, but
do you do fluorocarbon leader?
No, I mean, I'd use a lot of straight fluorocarbon, but I just think in general, if someone comes in and says, I want a rod that I'm going to go bass fish with it, and I want a bait caster, with braid, you could go throw a frog up in the lily pads. You could go throw a Senko on the edge of lily pads. You could flip a jig. You start getting into crankbaits and stuff like that, it's not going to be ideal. But once again, it's one of those things that it's hard to buy one rod that's perfect for everything. You can buy one rod that will work for everything, but it's not going to be perfect for everything. So you got to sacrifice on one end. If you put 15-pound fluorocarbon on it and you throw a frog way back into the lily pads and hook Big Mama, good luck. You're not getting them out. So that's kind of my take. I'm curious to see what Josh says.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. 7-foot medium heavy. If you could only pick one, but since he went that way, let me pick a different one. Then I would go with like a 7.5-foot heavy. That'll allow you to get away with so much more of your heavier bass tackle needs, punching grass, stuff like that, frog fishing. Even out on the ledges, having a big deep water stuff, football jig. I prefer a rod like 7 foot to 7 to 8 foot, somewhere in that variety, depending on what I'm doing. If you're more casting at targets where accuracy is a big deal, 7-foot medium heavy is going to be really good. If you're trying to start to launch stuff out into open water or across lily pads, that longer rod's going to give you a lot of soar there. And Loomis has got all kinds of different rods for that. They basically have the same. For the most part, it changes it a little bit, but they have, from their entry level stuff to their very top level stuff, they almost have the same numbers all the way across as far as like what you want, what you're looking for. And mind you that though I might throw an NRX sometimes, that's their highest end. It's not the best rod for everything. There's times that you want a rod that has less of a graphite, less sensitive graphite, because I don't want to feel the bites nearly as much. Or like you said with glass, you can get into some of that. But when it comes to a bait casting reel, I would say a Shimano Curado. It's been a staple reel for me since I first started. They're bulletproof, and I don't think there's a bait in the world that I can't throw with it, from the biggest swim baits out there to the little tiniest little micro jigs, stuff like that. I can throw it on a Curado, and great price point, like a $179, something like that, and they're just bulletproof. They'd last a long time. They've had a great name for a long time.
Yep, it's definitely a staple. Curado's been around for a long time. All right, so cadence to a jerkbait. What does that look like? And I mean, not only your personal opinion on this, but do you see on the circuit you guys are fishing that everybody kind of has their own little cadence that they do?
I mean, it's going to kind of boil down to how cold the water is and how aggressive the fish are. As that's how the warmer the water is, the faster you can work it. I generally work my jerkbait fast. I mean, I will slow it down in colder water, but generally I work it faster than most people, I guess. The whole key thing with the jerkbait, in my opinion, is having a slack line. You don't want your line tight and just kind of pulling the bait. If you pull your rod 2 feet, you only want to pull about a foot of line, and that'll make that bait start to dance around and move a lot more erratically and get it down deeper. That's the biggest thing. Like, I've seen people fish around me, and I've watched them work their jerkbait. And once again, I'm obsessed with jerkbaits. I fish them a lot, probably a lot more than maybe I should, I guess. But I'll watch people around me and be like, what the heck is that guy doing over there? he's throwing a jerk bait, but he's like reeling it and like just pulling the rod. You got to snap that rod, and kind of like when you're working a spook, a topwater spook almost. That slack line is what creates the action, and having the proper setup too.
Now, is that more of a reaction bite you're getting from the fish?
A lot of times it is, but now with some of the other technologies we have, it's kind of I'd call it almost a finesse tactic, because I can see exactly how them fish are reacting, and I can do things to make them bite when they don't want to bite. So generally it is a reaction bite, but a jerkbait has a certain drawing power that I can still see some of them fish I caught on Hartwell. A lot of them fish I caught out there, I was fishing 30 to 50 feet of water, and them fish would be 15 foot down, some would be 5 foot down, and them fish, when they seen that bait, they would come up 20 feet to eat that thing. So it has a lot of drawing power. And yeah, it's a magical bait if you know what you're doing with it.
Do either one of you guys build your own lures?
I make quite a few jigs myself. I actually just signed with a company. I actually designed a jig for someone. I actually just got some now, a certain one that I've been making for a long time. But I don't make plastics or anything, just like skirted bass jigs.
Yeah, same. I definitely leave that to the professionals at that. I just go and break them off, go and lose them for sure.
Yep. Well, if you're not breaking off, you're not catching fish, right?
That's right. Well, I guess.
Something like that. All right. So, and Josh, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but a fish's attitude. Can you kind of go on a little bit more? We got some questions coming in on that. And by the way, guys, we have pages of questions.
Yeah,
so
sweet.
If there's an opportunity for you guys to kind of help answer some of these after we wrap up for this evening, and I do need to put in another plug for make sure everybody's jumping on to scheels.com/fish series to make sure you're getting registered for the rest of the events and prize packages. Obviously, we got more experts coming on. Tomorrow we got fly fishing, which is going to be fantastic, and then we wrap up with some walleye fishing. So, but yeah, back to you, Josh. What do you think about that fish attitude?
Yeah, fish attitude is a big deal. Just like us, we're similarities in that you don't always wake up in the right mood or not always hungry, stuff like that. And I've heard, I went to a couple bass universities back in the day and stuff, and heard some big time pros back then talk about that fish only actively eat a couple hours of the day. So that's kind of a big deal. If they're eating, first of all, they'll probably eat almost anything you throw in there. Mm-hmm. if they're eating. With competition is going to be a big deal. The more competition there is, meaning the bigger the school is, or the more fish they have around them, the more likeliness that you can start to get them to bite, make one bite, keep them biting. And then the opposite is when they're just not in the mood. I see it all the time on Mille Lacs. Really anywhere we go, active target definitely helps show you their mood in a quick hurry. And, if you look at like one of the best anglers ever, obviously, or the best angler ever, and Kevin Van Dam, the dude didn't like dead stick a Cinco ever. He made fish bite. So I've explained this before, but if we were all sitting in front of each other and I just threw you something with you not expecting that, you use your hands to try to like either catch it or throw it away from you or protect yourself. Bass don't have hands, so they have a mouth. And so if you can move something fast enough through a school, past them, whatever, you can actually get just a straight reaction bite where they just open their mouth and they got treble hooks on it. They turn, and it's in their instinct to turn on it, and eat it, whatever it is. And lucky for us, we got hooks on the end of it. So, if a fish is eating, you're going to catch fish. And you can tell that a lot on active target, what their mood is, if they're not in the right mood, if you need to make them. And it can be anything from a jerk bait to, stroking a football jig. You're just dragging it in all practice. That worked great. And all of a sudden they're not biting, and all of a sudden you're just dragging an hour into it. You don't have no fish. And then you start stroking that thing as hard as you can. And then they jump on that. So it's switching it up. And we talked about color a little bit. And I don't think color is nearly as important as cadence is and how you're approaching the fish that you're fishing for. So when I say attitude, that's definitely what I meant. I mean, with smallmouth, they're just a little bit, little bit more pissed off, a little bit more pissier sometimes. They kind of have that. They're just a little bit they're just not, they kill, like, I would hate to be a perch and on a smallmouth lake. I don't know how they get across those reefs, to get this big or whatever. Smallmouths just have that kind of territorial attitude. And largemouth might eat a bluegill or two a day to get to 5 pounds. A small eat 100 little perch a day to get to 5 pounds. So you got to use that against them. You got to use that against them to put more in the boat for sure.
Very good. All right, so got a technique specific question here. When it comes to drop shotting, what do you guys look for? What makes you stop the boat? Is it the water depth, structure? What makes you pick that specific area?
For what? For drop shotting?
Yes, sir.
Well, a lot of times I'll drop shot when I see them. I do like to drop shot. I mean, I'll throw a drop shot. It depends on, again, what their forage base is. In their mood. It's usually like a rotation of baits I'll go through to get to a drop shot, unless we're talking smallmouth. They're just, again, they'll eat 100 minnows a day. So, a drop shot fits their profile, what they're looking for. But a lot of times, I always have a drop shot on the deck. It'll be my absolute last resort. Sometimes, like at Sam Rayburn last year, I broke off a couple of fish that would have got me in the Classic this year. I broke off like 3 of them in bushes brush piles that I couldn't get out. But that drop shot was my last resort. I threw everything else at that brush pile before I whipped out the spin and pull. But the biggest deal is if I see them, I can, with my electronics. Knows we got electronics all over our boat showing us what's down there. So if all of a sudden you get an arc in there, a drop shot's gonna be the first thing I'm gonna put on them, because it's not weightless because it has a weight. So to get to the bottom, but once it gets to the bottom, that is a weightless presentation, and a weightless presentation will get you just bites.
Very good, Pat.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is I usually, when I see the fish is when I'll stop and do that. So and especially if you see that fish on your graph, under your trolling motor, that drop shot's the fastest thing you can get down there. I mean, you can just open your bail, let it fall down there. It's going to go straight. It's not going to spiral around. It's just really efficient when you see a fish on your graph to get it down there. And when that thing's dancing around down there, like Josh said, weightless, it's pretty hard for them to turn it down.
Yeah. All right, so shore fishing. We all grew up at some point shore fishing. What are some of the feedback you guys can give for new anglers out there that may not be able to purchase a boat right now? I mean, obviously the marketplace itself it's tough to find a boat, but if you have to fish docks, piers, waterways, creeks, streams, rivers, small bodies of water, what are some of the things that you guys bring with you to go fish those? I mean, growing up, obviously today it's a little bit different for you guys in your lifestyle. However, going back to your roots.
I mean, I grew up fishing from shore, so I grew up fishing on a river, so we would always have like a jointed Rapala, a straight Rapala, a Mep spinner, and just a bass spinner bait, like a whatever Strike King spinner bait.
Mm-hmm.
You'd catch northern, you'd catch walleye, you'd catch bass, you'd catch anything that was around would bite those baits. Obviously live bait too, but artificial, it's hard to beat those ones I just listed. I've caught a lot of fish on those baits. I still do.
Mm-hmm.
From a boat.
Josh?
Yeah, definitely. Same thing. I recommend bringing a tackle box with a bunch of different stuff, because just like we are on the boat, you never really know what you're going to be presented with. You don't know how shallow and weedy it could be, or, you got wood out there, or you just want to make a really, really long cast. But I definitely recommend a pair of waders. I wore a pair of waders a lot, still do when I go out there, because it just gives me a little bit more moving. Plus, I'm not just the water's free for everybody to use. So as long as you get in the water, you can kind of move around a little bit more and try to access fish from different angles and stuff like that. And just a story today, I'm out there in an $80,000 bass boat trying to find some fish, fishing a point like a big time pro, and I watched some guy from the bank catch a big 3-pounder and show it to me from the bank. So I mean, bottom line is fishing's fishing. So just do whatever. But I've spent a lot of many days on the bank, and still do. Heck, all of us pros will all get together. We're all something, we got an off night or something, and we're at the hotel, the campground pond, trying to beat each other in a game there. So it's just, fishing from the bank, it definitely has its, things. Yeah, you're always wanting to be in the boat and moving around and all that, but still, you can definitely catch some good fish, and fishing's fishing.
Very good. All right, so on body water size, does your bait, I think this kind of goes back to match the hatch a little bit, but does bait size differ? If you're fishing a smaller body, bigger body, a water column or a lake that doesn't have as, 80, 90, 100-foot depth versus some of the other lakes that are super deep, do you guys see a difference between bodies of water outside of matching the hatch?
Like a pond might not grow as big a forage or have a forage base like a bigger lake is going to. So for sure, if it's just a little pond, you might want to size stuff down, stuff like that. But then again, you might run into fish that aren't nearly as pressured, and they haven't seen that. So I'd maybe go a little bit of both. I'd go one rod with something really big on it, and then another rod with something a little small, and you should be all right.
Very cool. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to forage base, and then just, the size of the fish that are in there. If you go to some little pond out in California that's got 12-pound largemouth in it, you could probably throw a giant swim bait, but if you go to some little pond on the back of the property that's got 12 inches in it, you're not going to want to throw a big, 10-inch swim bait. So they'll kind of, just based on how big the fish are in there and what size the forage are in there. If it's big bluegills or little tiny crappie minnows, if they're just eating crayfish, that kind of all factors into it.
Very good. All right, so this is going to be a multiple part question here. We'll do early season with Pat, and we'll do late season with Josh. So what are your go-to baits no matter what? Obviously, Pat, I'm picking on you because of the jerk baits. How the jerk baits to you, is that almost I shouldn't say 365 days a year, but for majority of your fishing season, do you always have a jerk bait hooked up?
It depends on the lake. I try to, if the water clarity's right and just the environment is right. I caught some fish on the Sabine River on a jerk bait, in 3 feet of water. So I do throw it a lot. It's just a confidence bait. I catch a lot of fish on it, but jerk bait, chatterbait, rattle trap. Probably, I don't do a whole lot of, honestly, early season crankbait fishing. I know a lot of people do. I don't do it a lot. That'd probably be the main things early in the season.
Plastics?
Yeah, I'll always have something to flip, whether it's a craw, I flip a lot of big bite craw tubes. I'll always have that out. But generally in the early part of the season, I don't fish like that a lot. I will once I find the fish, but I'm trying to find them with that, jerk bait, chatterbait, rattle trap, that kind of stuff. You got to cover water to find them. Mm-hmm. Once you find, say, you get into a bay where there's a bunch of fish biting, well then, after you go through and wipe them out with a chatterbait and jerk bait, then you go flip all the wood. You flip the clumps of weeds with that craw tube or the jig to pick up what's left. Or a lot of times, you can get some really big bites in the spring, flipping a 3/8 ounce jig. That's just something that I've caught a lot of giant largemouth on over the years. So that's kind of my take on it, I guess.
Thanks, Pat. Josh?
We're talking like fall when you say late season, or
say peak of summer into fall.
Yeah. Well, your bait fish are going to generally start getting a lot bigger, unlike in the spring. Mm-hmm. So what might have been little tiny paddle tails in the spring, now I'm going for more of a 4-inch, something like that, maybe a little bit bigger. But I would say a swim bait, like a paddle tail. I like the Biospawn Exo Swim. There's a whole bunch of paddle tails on the market. Again, matching the forage. And then I use an Outcast Tackle Goldeneye jig head, swimmer jig head. It's one I designed. It's meant to come through rocks. It comes through rocks unbelievably if you're fishing out deep. And a lot of times when you're talking about late summer and fall, I'm gonna be looking for deep water until it starts to get fall where those fish might largemouth might push back up in whatever they can. They're going to get shallower. Smallmouth, do a little bit of both actually. So, I'm going to throw a swim bait just because there tend to be, football jig is one of my absolute favorite things to throw for largemouth or smallmouth. They all eat crawdads. It's just a good bait to throw. So, and then, when you're talking southern reservoirs and stuff, I would say a buzz bait. A buzz bait's going to be a really big one because a lot of times in the fall they're drawing reservoirs back down, and those fish don't have near the cover up on the bank. They're trying to push back shallow. So a buzz bait's something that you can throw a long way. You can throw it through whatever is there around docks, around wood. And again, they're just feeding up, and some of those shads starting to push back into the creeks and stuff like that. So that buzz bait would be a pretty good killer come, late summer and into the fall.
Very good. So what are your favorite knots? Does that differ per bait? I mean, obviously a drop shop's going to be a little bit different, but if you're tying directly to the bait itself, what do you guys go with?
With fluorocarbon, I've been tying that, I think they call it a jam knot a lot. That's kind of what I've gone to almost exclusively now on fluorocarbon, other than for a drop shot, or I will tie a snell knot on a straight shank some when I'm flipping with heavy fluorocarbon. I flip with 25-pound fluorocarbon quite a bit, or 20. So I will tie a snell knot on that at times, not all the time, but sometimes. And then braid, I'll tie a Palomar, and then another knot that I don't even know the name of it, just one I learned. It's kind of like a double Palomar. We call it the rat key knot. It's I'd have to show you how to tie it because I cannot explain how to tie it, but that's really all I use. I don't tie any. And then a connection knot, I guess, from braid to fluorocarbon would be the other one. And that's pretty much an FG knot. Now that I learned how to tie that, I can't really go back to anything else.
Very good. Josh?
Yeah, I'm real easy. I use the FG knot to connect all my braid to fluorocarbon, and I just use a jam knot for everything. It's got 3 tag ends on it. That's how everyone knows that it's a jam knot. There are different variations of jam knots. I've seen 3 or 4 different ones. Essentially, it's all really, for the most part, the same. So I use a jam knot for everything. I actually like a jam knot for drop shot too. I just do a few extra twists around so that I have a bigger knot. And then when I run it back down through, my knot can never go inside my drop shot hook. It always stays out. I don't like when the knot starts popping, like a Palomar will pop back in, and you can't have that. You'll break that every time. So I just do a few extra, when I'm using light line, I tend to do a few extra wraps on a jam knot, and that'll make the knot even a little bit bigger, and then it won't allow it to go in there. But I just use a jam knot for braid and fluorocarbon, and I use the FG knot to connect everything.
Very good. So there is a ton of smallie questions coming up here from Minnesota, Wisconsin, all these areas. Both of you guys love them, so this will be fantastic. But what are you guys looking for when there's a ton of weeds on the water? Are the smallmouth deep in the weeds, or are they pushed off in the deeper water?
Generally, they're sitting on the side of it, or if there's little rock piles or something like that, or sand holes, they'll definitely use those. But smallie's got great vision, phenomenal vision. Like I think most anglers underestimate a smallmouth's ability to see, unlike a largemouth. Largemouth uses its lateral lines all the time, so it's more of a mountain lion. It ambushes its predator, where smallies are like a pack of wolves. They're just going to go chase it down and use their eyes to get it. So they don't got no business being buried up in the weeds. Rarely have I ever seen that where I've caught one in there, and it's usually kind of a fluke. But they'll definitely run the edges of weeds. And then again, it depends on your weeds. If it's straight milfoil, like that, they're probably not going to get in it. If it's like cabbage, stuff like that they got a lot of places to move in between, then they might get into it. And then like a jerkbait or a topwater, something like that, through that will definitely get those bites.
Pat?
Yeah, he answered it pretty accurately, I feel like. I mean, you will catch them in the weeds on occasion. I guess the one exception would be maybe on river systems, where generally shallower water and maybe a little dingier water. I've caught a lot of smallmouth, not necessarily punching through the weeds, but in thicker weeds than you would think of on a gin clear lake. That'd be maybe the one exception to the rule, is if you fish the Mississippi a lot, or a shallower river system with maybe a little more tannic water, the fish might use that a little bit more, the shallower weeds.
Very good. All right, question here. Kind of bouncing around. We got so many very, very technique-specific questions and general questions. But let's have a little bit of fun as well with this. What is your favorite fish to eat? Getting personal here.
I'd probably say a bluegill.
Oh.
That's what I would say. I mean, everybody loves walleye. Yeah, they're good, but I think I'd take a bluegill.
Josh?
Yeah, bluegills are really good. Bluegills are tasty. They're almost too close to a bass, but they are still at the same time. They are really, really good. I like cold water crappies are good.
Yeah.
Obviously walleye's good. Just as long as it's not a bass, you're good. You're good with me. Just
You guys don't eat bass?
It's not a bass. No, definitely don't eat bass.
Yeah, you don't see too many people eating bass.
No.
All right, another one here. Man, we've got so many questions. This is fantastic. All right. I know I just saw it. So what do you guys consider, and this one, I mean, is obviously up for interpretation. It's all, your personal preference or personal opinion, but what do you consider a trophy smallie? Any smallmouth, or are you guys looking for a 21, 22 inch?
Totally depends on where you're fishing for them.
Just like deer, right?
So, yeah, if you're at a place that 3-pounders are big, then that's going to be a dang good one.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to smallies, I think anything over 4 pounds, you're starting to look, that's good. And that's what you need at most of those smallmouth venues are going to be 4-pounders. It seems like there can be a lot of them around. Those smallmouth tournaments really show out better than 95% of largemouth tournaments. Smallmouth tournaments will actually have bigger weight, just because the abundance of good fisheries have 4 and 5 pounders. But a 7-pound smallie's I don't even know. That's just an amazing fish. 6-pound is really, really, really a big one, and 5-pounders are straight giants. So once you break that 4-pound mark, those are big smallies. And for being a smallmouth guide, I can tell you that by far majority of the people that I take out, which are serious fishermen still, haven't broke that 4-pound smallmouth mark until they got out in the boat with me. Then we tend to break it. But so that just goes to show you that I think a 4-pounder is kind of the prized smallie to get for sure.
Pat?
I would agree with that. We're all kind of guilty of it as fishermen. You catch one and you're like, oh man, that's a giant. That's got to be 4.5 pounds. And then you weigh it and it's like 3 3/4. So a legit 4 to 5 pound fish smallmouth is big. I mean, I've fished for smallmouth a long time on some really, really, really good fisheries, some of the best in the world. And I've caught 2 that I weighed in tournaments that were over 6 pounds. And then I caught one on Pickwick this year that was $5.99. But other than that, I mean, those are the only ones I've had around 6 pounds, and I've caught a lot of smallmouth. So people saying they're catching a bunch of 5 and 6 pounders, man, I challenge you to weigh them.
It's a 20-pound
on a
goose.
scale.
Put them on the scale. That's what I say too. Let's see it on the scale.
Okay, we had a hair jig question that came up, I know. So, and even for you, Josh, on this one, and Pat, if you fish hair jigs too, please chime in. But
I've never used one.
So Josh, with that hair jig, what size are you looking for? And then what's the technique involved with the hair jig?
Yeah, we're talking marabou
Yes,
jigs,
sir.
like for smallmouth, right? Yep. Yeah, I'm using a fighter fly. We Seth Fighter taught me that years ago. That's his little deal. He was taught by the Canadians, how to make it. Have some of his Canadian buddies up there, and then we took it in Minnesota, and I was always into tying, so I got pretty good at tying. That one to me is perfect. It has, now they're made. Outcast Tackle makes them, so that's the one that I use every year. every spring I still sit down and time myself up a couple just to say that I did it, but the production ones are just as good. You know, the key to hair is there's two things, and I actually just did a video for this. There's two reasons why you want hair. One, because it's cold water. You know, metal, when all else fails, when soft plastic, way back in the day, it was metal and it was hair is what people used to go bass fishing. Then soft plastics and jigs and stuff like that started to come along, and they work definitely better most times of the year. But when it's super cold, sometimes hair and metal will still get those bites. So right away when the ice comes out, I like to throw a hair jig. And a lot of the reasons why is because when the ice breaks, you're going to have like, those fish. First of all, those fish are like Pat saying, they're getting to 15 foot and shallower. And that's where I want to target a smallmouth too. And the pre-spawn is definitely 5 to 15 feet, somewhere in that, 8 to 12 is like really good. That's really good for a hair jig because again, those fish can see amazingly well. So that thing's wet. It's like this small, in the water column. I think a lot of people originally think we're fishing it on the bottom, and that's not necessarily the case. And that's the key because the rocks, when the ice goes out, grows like a weird mold or not mold, like algae on top. Yeah. And you can't fish it. You can't throw a Ned rig on it. It'll just get full of stuff. So, but you still got to, at the same time, I can't be reeling something too fast. They're not in the mood. Like he was saying, you got to have the right cadence for the right time of year. They're not going to kick their tail too far to chase something down. So I need something that's going to just kind of float through the water real slow, stay just off the bottom, and not get fouled up. And the hair jig gets that. Secondly, when they go to post spawn, it's a good bait too during the spawn. Like I said, to peg fish off, just flinging around at light spots, at rocks, stuff like that. When the females are moving up and they're in their little packs, a great bait to get them. And generally you always have to have clear water. I've never seen it work in any kind of too dirty or stained water. It's always got to be really clean. So the second thing is going to be reverse is the mayfly hatch after the spawn. A lot of times on these lakes up north, we're going to have a mayfly hatch, which is more so around the end of June, 4th of July for us up north. And you wouldn't believe that a smallmouth that eats crawdads every single day of its life, and then those little mayflies, they start hatching from the bottom, they float up, and they just gorge themselves on them. And it's always the big ones. The small ones don't even really know yet. They're still eating crawdads and stuff. It's the big ones that have great eyesight that know that they can eat up. So I'll either catch them. You can either watch them come up and eat like the casings off the top, and you can target them that way, or you just I like to get in that 12-foot range and keep my hair jig at roughly around 6 foot post spawn, and just move around those same breaks that Pat was talking about where they want to pull up. They're going to use those same ways to move back out. And that hair jig will definitely get the bites. And the other reason I like it is I won't never lose them. Like they kill it. They eat it. And the biggest key is like a 7/6 medium light action rod and the lightest braid you can find. So like I use 8-pound is usually what I use, 8-pound Power Pro, and a little bit shorter leader, like an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. But you don't want it too long, because you want to be able to really whip that little hair jig as far as you can. And that's the key, because everything's so clean, the water's so clean, you got to make super big casts with that little tiny hair jig. And but yeah, definitely once 4th of July comes for most everywhere, I think the hair jig kind of that bite dies.
Very good. All right, Pat, not to put you under the gun, but you have about 45 seconds before you have a very exciting announcement for this evening. Hair jig.
Okay.
What's your favorite?
For a hair jig?
Yes, sir.
I have a guy tie him for me, and I don't fish it a ton. I mean, I have obviously caught fish on it, but Josh is way more seasoned at that technique than I am. So, but yeah, a long rod, 7/6 medium light braid, 6-pound fluorocarbon leader, long casts, reel it. Catch big ones.
Tick. I love it. Such a sweet bite. Tick.
Very good. Appreciate it, guys. All right, we got Matt back up here. This is your last opportunity to make sure you guys are getting registered, and we're excited for the rest of the week coming up here. And for sure, before we get off the end of the night, we just want to make sure we thank Josh and Pat on this. A lot of really good information. We've got, looks like 5 pages, if I'm looking at the Word document right here, 5 pages of questions. We will get some answers for everybody out there. Appreciate everybody tuning in, but Matt, you're up.
Sounds good. Right here are the names. We are very excited to let everyone know. I do have to say really quick, I was trying to answer all your guys' questions. At one point, I looked down and I thought my fingers were on fire. I was trying to answer them so fast, but it was definitely something I tried to do. But thank you guys. We'll try to get to most of your questions after tonight. So,
We got a drum roll.
I don't think we have that effect, do we?
I don't know.
We do. All right. So for the $500 SCHEELS gift card winner, we have Zach I from West Jordan, Utah. And that's for the $500 SCHEELS gift card. For the second one, this is the big one, for the $1,000 SCHEELS gift card, we have Vern J. from Sauk Rapids, Minnesota. So congratulations, guys.
That's great.
Congrats, guys. That's awesome prizes.
Very good. Well, again, we appreciate everybody tuning in this evening. Tomorrow night, we've got Tony and Kim Ferry from Sims. We're going to be talking about some fly fishing, which is very excited. We had a call with them a couple weeks ago, and they're a dynamic duo for sure. They were out tarpon fishing, so hopefully they got some good fishing stories for us. But Josh and Pat, again, can't thank you guys enough for taking time. I know you guys have been on the water, hitting it, grinding it. You guys are getting into the time of the year for this, and we definitely know it's not easy. And Josh, we definitely appreciate you finding that rental house with good internet connection this evening.
No problem,
But thanks, guys. Make sure you guys are jumping on to SCHEELS Outdoors and following us on Facebook and social media with Instagram as well. And if you got any questions, keep the questions coming in. We're going to get to them. Again, we got 5 pages, it looks like, and we're excited. And again, good luck this fishing season, guys. We'll be watching you on the winning circle.
Right on. If I could, I just want to thank everybody. And if anybody got any questions for me personally, hit me up on any of my social media. It's always Josh Douglas Fishing. And send me messages on there, reference this deal in the title or whatever, and I'll happily sit down. Might be after this tournament, but I'll get to them and answer all those questions for sure. Pat, good luck, bud. Keep writing them, dude.
You too. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.